All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me tonight for my very first community conversation. Really looking forward to spending the next hour or so with all of you while I cover a number of important topics and give a bit of a recap of the work we've done so far as council. But I do want to start off tonight by acknowledging the traditional land on which we reside is in Treaty 6 territory. I'd like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Nakota Iska, Nakota Sioux, and Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of one of the largest communities of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It's a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share Edmonton as a home. And I'm grateful that my family and I have been afforded the opportunity to build a life here. Together, we call upon all of our collective honored traditions and spirits to work in building a great city for today and future generations. All right, and with that, again, I'm super excited to be joining all of you here tonight. And I'm actually going to start off with a brief introduction of Mike, who is helping put on this entire production. Mike is my council assistant. He is the mastermind behind all the tech tonight, who is doing a fantastic job getting this rolling. Mike, would you mind saying hello to everybody?
Hello. Yeah, as Ashley said, I am one of her assistants in her office. Yeah, and we're kind of the first folks to receive a lot of inquiries and a lot of questions and stuff, and make sure that Ashley is as prepared as possible for council meetings and community conversations like tonight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. And as Mike said, you will likely be hearing from him at some point, whether that's through our newsletters. And Mike is my first point of communication along with Michael. It's so funny, both my assistants are named Michael. So we've gone with Mike and Michael for short. But at some point, if you are in correspondence with us, you'll be hearing from them. So just a bit of a rundown of how tonight's going to work. So first, I'm going to start with a bit of a recap and kind of look back at the last few months to talk about what's happened around council so far. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some neighborhood specific updates for Ward Métis. And then what I'm sure a lot of you are waiting for, we are going to talk about snow and ice and windrows. So stay tuned for that. And of course, there will be lots of time for questions. Please feel free throughout the evening to send your comments into the comment section. Ask any question you may have. I'll try to get to all of them, but if I don't, or if I don't have an answer for you right away, we can follow up with you after. And I also wanted to say that Mike will be moderating the comment section throughout the evening. And a reminder that these community conversations are really meant to be an opportunity to respectfully engage in dialogue about issues that matter in our city and in Ward Métis. All right, so with that, I'm going to start by providing a little bit of a look back on the first 3 months on council. And it's funny, so much has happened over the last 3 months. So I have to break it down into a few highlights. But I'll start by saying, the transition from campaign mode to councillor mode, it's very, very quick. Election night happens, you get one day to kind of pack up your campaign office and then you're in City Hall. So it's a quick transition, a very exciting transition. And we've actually gotten a lot of really good work done so far. So very early on, we had our swearing in back on October 26th. And that's where my colleagues and I had our inaugural meeting. And that's also where Mayor Sohi brought forward a motion to address anti-racism, as well as hate-based violence in our city. And I was really happy to see that that was actually unanimously supported by the entirety of council. And it's important for a few reasons. And I think it really helps set that tone and establish that this is absolutely a priority for this council. And looking forward on February 14th, that's when we're going to be getting the report back from that motion, as well as some future reports in early March around community safety and well-being, which kind of ties into that work as well. And then over the next few weeks, following swearing in, as the temperatures began to drop, council worked quite hard alongside administration, the province, as well as community partners to ensure that there were enough shelter beds in the city to help accommodate everybody who needed one. And I think it was interesting because as part of that conversation, there was also a clear recognition from this council that shelters are not a permanent solution to houselessness. So it's really critical that we not only respond to those types of immediate needs, but we continue to advance work on permanent supportive housing. So as you can see here, we have a photo up of one of the 2 permanent supportive housing sites that are being built right now in Ward Métis. And this one is in King Edward Park. I'm really excited to see it going up. It's actually been fun watching it progress over time. But that's just one example of permanent supportive housing where it's not just about putting a roof over someone's head, but it's ensuring they have the supports they really need and those wraparound services, mental health supports, addiction supports, employment supports, for example, to thrive. All right, and moving on, the next major item that we dealt with was the budget. And that is a huge item. I could probably have a whole session devoted to that alone. That would take much more than an hour because obviously the budget is a massive undertaking. And this was just an adjustment. It wasn't the 4-year. So I won't get to everything right now, but at the highest level, we were able to keep tax increases among the lowest in the region, where other municipalities saw about twice as much of an increase as ours. At the same time, we were able to devote resources to delivering the core services that Edmontonians rely on. And we were also able to continue making progress on some of those larger city building priorities so that we are still moving forward towards a more equitable, sustainable, and climate resilient city. And I'll just take a minute or so to talk about some of the budget highlights for me. One of the ones that I was really pleased to see was that we froze transit fares at $3.50 rather than allowing them to rise to $4. And I thought that was critical for a number of reasons. We are still in the midst of a pandemic. People are still hurting. And just in general, I think that having an equitable, accessible, and viable transit system is a transit system that is attainable for everyone. So ensuring that people are getting the good value for the system that we're providing is really important to me. Another one that I was really excited about was that we actually devoted some dollars towards the design of active transportation infrastructure. So it was around $750,000 for that, and about $4 million into the design and construction of missing sidewalk links throughout the city. And I can't tell you the number of conversations I had throughout the campaign where people talked about, there's really good cycling infrastructure that'll get me from, point A to almost point B. And only if there was that missing link that was connected, that is what would enable me to have a safe and viable journey. And the same thing can be said for sidewalks. So really pleased to see that we're taking a bit more of a proactive approach there and filling in some of those gaps. One of the other rather large budget decisions that was made was to reduce the planned increase to the police budget from $11.9 million to $1 million, and to be able to reallocate those funds towards community safety and well-being initiatives. So I was very pleased to support that. And I really look forward to future conversations that we're going to have as a council, because these are large conversations about how we can really have a comprehensive community safety ecosystem that is more proactive, more preventative, and really reducing that demand and workload on police so that we're able to have them respond when necessary, but in other instances, applying a bit more of a community-based model, funding things like mental health, having addiction supports, helping folks who are houseless, who are maybe experiencing trauma. That can actually be a more systemic solution to some of the issues around social disorder and crime that we see in our city. All right. Oh, and this one is fun too. So back in early December, I made my first motion as a councillor, and that first motion was around problem properties. And this really arose directly out of concerns that I was hearing from community members in Ward Métis. A lot of them live in and around the Alberta Avenue area that I was hearing from directly. And when we're talking about problem properties, just so everybody's kind of on the same page, I'm really referring to properties that have kind of a recurring history of bylaw violations, non-compliance. They're often boarded up, derelict. Sometimes they require frequent visits from enforcement and emergency services. But importantly, they're also quite often risks for fire, hazards, or safety concerns. And sometimes there's illegal activities associated with them as well. So that's what we're talking about when I say problem properties. And as many of you are probably well aware, in Ward Métis, we have been experiencing quite a rash of fires and suspected arsons, many of which are occurring on vacant and derelict sites. So not only has this been really scary and terrifying for neighboring residents, but it can also have really tragic consequences because the people who often are sort of informally seeking shelter in these structures end up being harmed. So clearly this is a serious concern for me, and the toll that vacant and derelict properties are taking on the health and safety of our community members is a major concern. So this motion is really intended to elevate that conversation. So it's quite a long motion. I won't go through it in excruciating detail, but it essentially asks administration to first bring back some metrics and data and information around how prevalent problem properties are. And it also asks us to look at what other jurisdictions have done. Not only is this a municipal issue, but it does kind of cross over with provincial and sometimes federal jurisdiction as well. The second part of the motion, it's 5 parts, asks about additional enforcement tools. So when we think about enforcement tools, there's things like fines for sure, but I'm also interested in looking at things like property tax subclasses, there we go, to sort of financially incentivize and push these types of properties to redevelop. Because at the end of the day, if we have them redeveloped, they're not going to sit boarded for years on end. We want them adding to the community. We want them to be viable housing options that are safe and livable. The third part of it also looks at opportunities to partner with housing providers. Again, the intention there is how do we expedite the redevelopment of these properties? And then the final 2 pieces touch on advocacy opportunities. So again, since there is that sort of interjurisdictional play here, how can we advocate up to higher levels of government to get some action on their end as well? So I will say that if you want to really dive into that, there is a blog post up on my website, ashleysalvador.com, where you can learn more about problem properties in general, as well as the motion that I brought forward. All right, I'm just going to take a check-in here as well to take a peek at the comments. Oh, look at all of these comments coming in. That's fantastic. So I will get to a few of them in a minute here. And actually, maybe now is a good time before I transition to our more neighborhood specific updates. So Mike, you've been probably monitoring some of those comments. Is there any questions that you think are relevant at this time?
Yeah, we have a few here. Oh boy, yeah, okay, there's a few here. With the change to the police budget, Elaine says council gave them no chance to adjust their budget. What would you say to Elaine about that?
Sure, that's a great question, Elaine, and I know that there was some discussion back and forth around whether or not this was kind of the right time. I felt that it was. I think that this is not about not funding police appropriately. It's about making sure that we have the resources available so that we could actually reduce some of that demand on police. So I can hear that point, absolutely. And I think that, as I mentioned, this is part of that larger conversation. So actually really soon in Q1, council is going to be having a larger discussion about that coordination and integration piece. So again, it's not just about thinking of police as the social safety ecosystem. We have to think about other parts of that ecosystem too, that together will create a safer city. So hopefully that sort of answers your question. I think that as it stands, we are still providing resources to police, about $384 million. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. And yeah, I was happy to see that that was moved forward by my colleagues. Any other questions, Mike?
Perfect. Yeah. Both Dylan and Jan had questions about just kind of active outdoor infrastructure. Or sorry, Dylan, sorry, I might have said Dan. Will you support active infrastructure for outdoor activities like the ice climbing wall, the Alpine Climb Club of Canada, or other climbing or mountain biking based facilities in the River Valley? And then Jan was just talking about, especially with missing links in neighborhood revitalization, or would neighborhood revitalization be a good time to do an audit of it, existing infrastructure and adjust as needed?
Those are both great questions. So I'm looking at Dylan's right now around supporting active outdoor infrastructure. Ice climbing, that sounds awesome. Never done it. I think I saw it one year. It might have been at the ski club. But creating those types of opportunities for people to be active and doing activities in our winters in particular, I think is really fantastic. And yeah, I'd be excited to see how that could roll out. When it comes to mountain biking facilities, I think that Edmonton is really uniquely positioned to sort of lean into our mountain biking potential. I remember meeting a surprising number of mountain bikers on the campaign trail who would like to see a bit more of a formalized structure so that our trails in the River Valley can have markers, for example. So if someone gets injured, it's much easier to have some help arrive to that exact location. So being able to support our mountain biking community, I think, is a bit of an untapped opportunity. So yes. And then to Jan's point around missing links, and if we can sort of tie that into neighborhood revitalization, potentials to do audits, I think that's a great suggestion. I think that neighborhood renewal, when we're already coming in with the intention of sort of tearing everything up, is a prime opportunity to create that type of change. At the same time, I think that having some targeted interventions so that neighborhoods don't have to wait decades to see those links improved, that has to be a priority as well. And my understanding is that as a city, we do maintain kind of a database of where some of those high priority missing links are. And also, I should give a shout out to Pass for People too, because they've done some fantastic work in this realm as well.
Perfect.
Alrighty.
And then I think there's just one more question here, I would say, before we move on to the more neighborhood specific stuff, because there are a lot of great questions about neighborhood specific stuff that is coming up, I promise.
Okay.
But Craig asks, speaking of problem properties, would this include commercial buildings like the Avenue Theatre?
Great question. So in the wording of my motion, I didn't read it out exactly to you, that administration provide a report on efforts to address residential and commercial problem properties. So I would love to see some conversation around how to, again, expedite some movement on the commercial side, just to make sure that we're making the most of our main streets. I do talk a lot about having vibrant main streets and having activated storefronts so we can have that vibrant, welcoming pedestrian realm is really important. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to some more neighborhood specific updates, and just keep those questions coming. This is really fun. Yeah, this is fantastic. So neighborhood specific updates. Just going to take some time to point out a few things that have been happening around Ward Métis before we dive into the topic of the night around snow clearing. And we'll start by, why don't we throw up a map, Mike, of Ward Métis really quick, just so everyone can kind of be on the same page around what communities we're talking about. So as Mike gets that up, I will lead with, where should we start? Let's start in Holyrood. All right, so across the river over in Holyrood, I was really excited to approve an application from the Greater Edmonton Foundation for a multi-unit affordable seniors housing project. And that's, again, in Holyrood. And actually beyond the neighborhood, or sorry, the ward map here, Mike, we could probably get up the photo of Golden Homes, because that's the site where this development is going to be located. So it is a 4-story building that's going to take place right where the bungalows are of Golden Homes. Some of you might be familiar with that site. And just to speak to it a little bit, we really are in quite dire need of more affordable, accessible seniors housing in our communities. So I was really pleased to see that this project was approved. I know that there were some concerns just around kind of the scale of the building, but I really do believe that this is going to be a great addition to the community, and that GEF will be able to sort of work collaboratively with members of the community to add in some really great amenity spaces and features to enhance the neighborhood. I know there was some discussion around having some raised garden beds, for example, so that there can be kind of shared outdoor amenity space and area to gather. So going forward, very happy to be involved in those types of conversations if there's folks out there who are watching and want to reach out. And yeah, I think it's also a really great location, pretty close to transit, close to new LRT. Eventually, when Bonnie Doon Mall is redeveloped, it's going to be a bit of a hub there. So really exciting to know that there's seniors housing going into an area that will create those 15-minute communities that we're really after, where people can access their needs close to home and live locally. All right, so we're actually just going to go up the road from this site to the intersection of 85th Street and 96th Avenue. And Mike's going to pull up a photo of this crossing. Some of you might know it. It's right between Holyrood and Strathern. And as Mike gets that up, I'm super excited to provide this update. So a new pedestrian activated flashing amber lights are going to be installed as part of the city's Safe Crossings program right at this intersection. And I have heard from countless residents that this is a really problematic crossing, and it has been for years. So the current signage is not enough. I actually heard there's a lot of kids that cross over to go to Holyrood for school. So knowing that this piece of infrastructure is going to get put in place will make for a safer neighborhood, which is fantastic. And there's some other locations too in Ward Métis that are going to be receiving some upgrades as well. So one is over in Bonnie Doon, and then there's another in Alberta Avenue. And maybe we could put the link to the interactive map in the comments, Mike. Does that work? Yeah. Okay. Because there's a whole interactive map where you
I
go
definitely will.
Awesome. Where you can go and see all of the different upgrades that are being put in. So it's a cool thing to explore. So we'll pop that in there for you. Okay. So we're still going to stay south of the river. I promise we're going to go north in a second, but we're going to go over to Otwell now to talk a little bit about neighborhood renewal. So for neighborhood renewal in Otwell, I want to first thank the folks who participated in the online survey and provided their feedback on the draft designs. And I know when I posted the designs on social media, they got a lot of traction. There were some good conversations going on, some really great perspectives shared. In general, I won't go on about this too much, but at a high level, the draft design really incorporates sort of multimodal transportation opportunities. So there's some shared use paths that are going to be put in or that are part of the design so far. There's sidewalk improvements that are included, pocket parks, boulevard trees. And for folks who might not be aware, just a little tidbit about neighborhood renewal. It's a really unique program because it's actually fully funded as part of our operating budget. It used to be much more sort of piecemeal and, in my opinion, a little less equitable. So happy to see that neighborhood renewal is a priority for our city, and happy it's finally coming to Otwell. I know that there are a lot of sidewalks in Otwell that are crumbling, to say the least, and are quite unsafe and hazardous. So it'll be nice to finally have that come through. And just to let everybody know, the final draft designs are going to be put out in the spring. So there will be another opportunity to review those and provide feedback. All right. And okay, one more. This is a good one. I'm moving north. We're going to stop right in the middle, right on the river, because I'm going to talk about the Tawatina Bridge really quickly, because Cloverdale for so long has been missing out on that pedestrian connection across the river. And the Tawatina Bridge is finally open. So long awaited, really overdue, and really excited to see that pedestrian and cyclist connection reestablished. So I was able to, oh, this is a funny photo. Yeah, that was right before our big snowfall, but was able to go out to the grand opening back in December. And there was one day it warmed up right after the cold snap we had, and everybody was out checking out the bridge. There's absolutely beautiful artwork on sort of the ceiling of the bridge as you walk under. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, strongly suggest you do so. All right, now we're going north. So gonna go over to East Glen Pool. So jumping across the river, repairs at East Glen Pool are finally done, and East Glen is open and open for good. So it opened back on December 7th, and I know that a lot of community members have been rallying to protect it for years. So after these renovations, I'm really excited to see everybody returning. I know it's a treasured local amenity. It's really nice to have that walkable community scale pool right in the heart of a neighborhood. So I'm sure everyone in the Highlands Bellevue area has already known about this for a while, but wanted to highlight it too because I'm also excited. Okay, and the final neighborhood specific update that I'm going to give is a really quick one. It's just about the bridge railing over on Ada Boulevard. So right at the connection between Highlands and Virginia Park, there's the bridge connecting right across Wayne Gretzky Drive. And I think we have a photo where it didn't have the railing. And a lot of folks flagged that as pretty concerning, a bit of a safety issue. And I know temporary barriers have been put up, but I just wanted to let folks know I did ask, and the final installation of the permanent railings is going to be in March. So it's coming up soon, which will be nice to see. So thank you everybody for providing that feedback to the city. It was nice to see that we were able to be responsive. Okay. So before we go to snow and ice and windrows, why don't we jump to some more questions? Look at all of these comments. Okay, Mike, what do we got?
Let me find a few here. Sorry, there was a lot going back and forth here. I love it. A lot of just like, hello, glad you're doing this, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. And just on that note, we do want to make this a regular occurrence too. And if you have any feedback, please let us know, because we really do want to make these as engaging and fun as possible. No promises yet, but we were joking about having maybe a phone in. You can phone in, we can take your calls. There's lots of things we can do to get creative about this type of engagement. So please let us know.
Well, and then also hopefully when it's appropriate too, hopefully we can also do a combination of having these potentially at a community league and stuff too, and have an actual thing. Because I'm at my own house, actually here. Sorry, I'm at my own house. Ashley's at her own house. We're kind of like streaming this from afar here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's quite the ordeal over here. It's pretty awesome though.
Yes. Okay. Another one from Elaine. Is there an example of kind of or how, say, like on infill housing where the lot was split and a property that was once taxed at $3,500 a year and that property now pays like a lot more? Like what?
Okay.
How?
What's the question part?
So what's the city
normal
doing?
Or typical?
Yeah, like what's the city doing with the additional taxes that they're receiving from infill housing?
Yeah, so I can talk. Obviously, I don't know the specific situation, but I can talk a little bit more broadly about sort of taxation, the relationship between taxation, the way we grow, and infill. So I'll talk about that, and hopefully that'll kind of tease out the answer for you, Elaine. And in general, the farther we spread out, of course, the more expensive our city becomes to operate and maintain. And as we sort of gently densify our neighborhoods, whether it's through things like lot splitting, so skinny homes is what some people refer to them as, or things like duplexes, garden suites, row housing, it creates a more efficient tax base. So if we're able to add that density here, instead of at the fringes, we're actually reducing over time our cost in terms of maintaining and operating a city. So yeah, it's just a more efficient way to grow if that makes sense. And of course, those tax dollars go towards, maintaining core services. Snow clearing actually is a fun example to talk about, because when we think about how much ground we have to cover, just in terms of roadways, we have about 11,000 kilometers of roadways in Edmonton. And it just takes a lot of time and a lot of dollars to get around to all of those. So if we're able to be more efficient, not only are we going to reduce those costs over time, but we can become more efficient with our service delivery. So hopefully that answers the question around where those dollars go and how that plays into conversations around our growth as a city. And any other questions, Mike? Yeah, I'm going to scroll through too. Oh yeah, we can, I guess, what is the best way to share this kind of stuff, Mike? Actually, on that note, on staying in touch with folks, I should say, I'll tell you now, I was going to tell you at the end, but we do have our brand new website that's up as well. So we've revamped it from the campaign site to Councillor site. And there is opportunities to sign up for ongoing updates through our newsletter. So similar information will be shared through that mechanism as well. So if you are looking for those types of ongoing updates to stay engaged, that's another means that you can do so. Yeah, we are going to be putting it up on YouTube. Just recognizing that not everybody has Facebook. It's challenging. It's tough to sort of reach everybody and tailor platforms to their needs. But I think this is a good starting point. And again, I really appreciate that sort of suggestion and feedback. And we can definitely take that away and make sure we're spreading this as far and wide as possible. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So snow and ice and windrows. I like to add the and windrows in there because that's what my inbox is full of right now. I know I just scrolling through, I have seen a number of comments and questions around snow clearing. And just judging by the quantity of emails in my inbox, I assume a lot of folks are here for that. So let me start by saying, just right off the bat, I absolutely share your concern that the current approach is not quite right. Clearly, there are some accessibility challenges that have been created by the windrows, and they're really problematic. It is probably the most commonly cited concern from constituents recently, and I agree that the approach does need to shift. So I'll start by saying a little bit about our current policy. So the current policy is to not clear windrows from residential areas unless they're over 30 centimeters and block a driveway. So this year in particular, additional blading and heavy snowfall has led to really large windrows. I know even thinking in my neighborhood, yes, the actual driveway got cleared, but the access to kind of street parking where we have the sort of mini sidewalk across the boulevard, there's a giant windrow in the way. And I know that was quite a concern that we were hearing from folks across the ward. So going forward, Council does have a discussion that is scheduled for April 25th to talk about options to increase the service standard in the snow and ice control procedure. So this report's going to include a bunch of things. So it's going to talk about any equipment, staffing, and budget changes that might be required to increase the standard with a greater emphasis on safety, efficiency, as well as connectivity. So thanks to my colleague Andrew Mack for putting this motion forward back in August to get this on the agenda. And I really understand that Edmontonians would like to have seen kind of the new council rapidly alter our practices for budgeting for snow and ice removal, but really good decision making. It does take time. So yeah, again, shout out to Councillor Knack, who had the foresight back in the summer to get this conversation moving, because we don't usually think about it until it's literally coming down on us and blanketing us in snow. So for that conversation, I think there's a few things that need to be addressed. So first is related to blading. So from my perspective, I think we really need to evaluate the proper level of blading so that we aren't making matters worse with residential service. So residential roadways, they actually used to have a 10-centimeter snowpack, more recently a 5-centimeter snowpack. And this year, as you're well aware, we've been blading to bare roadway on residential streets. So it's kind of a trade-off, right? So given the freezing rain and snowpack, larger ruts can often form and affect safety, while blading them away resolves that. The trade-off can be large windrows, which of course are problematic and create accessibility issues for our communities. So that's one thing I think we really need to dig into and discuss. The second thing I think we need to talk about is the potential for windrow removal, maybe strategic windrow removal. And I think that, while previous councils might have deemed full windrow removal too expensive or even economically infeasible, I do believe we need to look at situations where it might make sense. So again, maybe those access points for street parking, just that we have, equitable pedestrian mobility in our city. And I should also say that last Friday, the city actually began a windrow trial where they're removing the windrows in Griesbach. And that's an opportunity to really gather some more information about what it would take to offer different levels of windrow removal service. So with that information gathering, we'll be able to have a more informed discussion about what sort of a larger scale windrow removal might look like, instead of completely writing off that opportunity. Now, the third thing that is going to become increasingly as important as things warm up is drainage. So I think we need a better solution to clear some of our drainage infrastructure. The city is working with EPCOR on this, as not properly clearing the catch basins has some real impacts for EPCOR's drainage management. So during the few warmer days that we've had, this is a very illustrative photo. Drainage concerns are already arising. So I would, prefer to get ahead of this, but again, that'll be a conversation that we have, and I want to be able to bring that to the table. And then the very, very last thing, I know there's a big discussion about snow and ice, but I think communication also needs to be better. So I think we need to look at better ways to inform residents as to when they should move their vehicles from front streets. So I have heard a lot of concern from residents that they weren't aware, or maybe their neighbors weren't, and there were some challenges with that. So from my perspective, really one of the primary ways that we can increase compliance with the parking ban is through better communication. Because I don't think enforcement alone is going to solve the problem. If we had better communication about when crews are actually entering a neighborhood, it gives folks a more reasonable chance to comply. So that's a big one. And I've actually had some good suggestions sent in for better communication, whether it is more signs, more accurate maps is a big one, electronic notifications, or there was actually a suggestion around using the WasteWise app that many Edmontonians use for reminders for their waste pickup schedule. Maybe there's a way to sort of coordinate that for snow clearing as well. Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think about snow clearing, it really comes down to equitable mobility, because everybody deserves to move around our city safely in all seasons, right? We're a winter city. And I mentioned this before, but our 11,000 kilometers of road really presents a significant challenge, and decisions between blading and windrow collection, things like response time, parking bans, and things like cost. There's a lot of process implications here. So I look forward to that fulsome conversation that is really going to be about trade-offs. And I think this is all the more important given our changing climate. Unpredictable weather, that's a reality that we're going to have to face, and it's only going to ramp up. So being able to have this conversation now so that we can be more proactive about our approach, I think will serve us well. And then the final thing that I will say is, throughout all of these conversations, my really big priority is going to be around thinking of snow and ice through the eyes of seniors, folks with limited mobility, and vulnerable road users. So absolutely, I want to make sure that we're delivering the best service possible while still achieving good value for tax dollars, and that we have a city that works for everybody. So if there are any specific questions around snow and ice removal, Mike, I think now might be a good time to take some of those.
Yeah, so funny enough, Mike, and it's not me. Also, sorry, I apologize. I forgot to unmute my mic during that last little bit, and some of you were definitely commenting that they could not hear me. But what's funny is you can always you can hear me, and the transcript gets me too. But Mike, and not me, Mike, asks, can the city invest in buying its own snow removal equipment and train its own City of Edmonton employees to operate equipment? Abolish the contractual work year after year?
That's a great question. And I think that can absolutely be included in our discussions. I mentioned that having a frank conversation about our equipment needs and about sort of who that should be under. I think that that's absolutely fair. And I will look forward to talking about that when it comes back in April for sure. And any other snow and ice? Yeah, and I definitely hear those concerns. I'm looking at, Michelle, your comments around, dangerous for people and ambulances that might not be able to access some of these spaces and these neighborhoods. Absolutely.
And also just a lot of comments about dog walkers and stuff too.
Yeah.
And just how many dog owners we have in Ward Métis as well.
We have so many dog owners. There was, I'm trying to remember the stat. I don't remember the exact number, but there's more folks who own dogs than folks who have kids, I think it was. Do you remember, Mike? Something like that. But there are a lot of dog walkers and folks with pets in our communities.
I just remember the stat. I haven't looked at like the open data recently, but like the stat that like Ward 7, or what formerly used to be Ward 7, had like the highest percentage of dog owners in the ward there. Sorry, I'm getting a bunch of different information and stuff. Miles Berry, it's not related to snow removal, but Miles asked, can you explain a bit about how off-site levies might work to finance infrastructure needs, and that will help propel missing middle development?
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about off-site levies. And I'll preface this by saying that we are, as a city and as a municipality, we're quite limited in what we can apply off-site levies to. Right now, we see off-site levies in the more suburban context. For example, with fire halls, the developer is essentially contributing to that cost, and it's able to ensure that the benefit accrued from that type of amenity or necessary infrastructure or service is delivered to folks who need it. So we have not, to my knowledge, explored it from a more mature neighborhood context, but I would be interested to see how that could be applied, I guess, Miles. It's a great question because, really, having more of that medium density, missing middle style development, it's going to be critical for our climate goals. It's going to be critical for housing affordability. It'll be critical for achieving the city plan. We want those more walkable, dense, amenity-rich communities, and we have to really work on reducing some of the barriers that are currently in the way. And yeah, offsite levies, I'd be curious to see how that could fit into it. So don't have a perfect answer for you, but maybe we can have an offline conversation about that. Well, still online, just not this online. And I'm looking at some comments here too.
Perfect.
Oh, we got a shout out for WasteWise.
I was about to say that. Yeah. Yeah. No, WasteWise is very handy, especially on a Tuesday night. At least that's when my collection happens. It gives me a little notification and everything. I would definitely highly recommend WasteWise to people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I see Craig, who was agreeing about sort of that lack of communication around when crews are coming into neighborhoods. So definitely agree with you on that one, Craig. Okay. Any others?
Elaine has another one here. What are your thoughts on the big debt that the city currently has?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I would probably be seeking some further clarification there, Elaine. But when it comes to debt, the city has opportunities to borrow for things like, large infrastructure projects when we are building maybe a new overpass or road or brand new facilities, for example. So absolutely, that's an appropriate tool to use so that we can deliver the services that Edmontonians ultimately need and rely on to live a good life here. So I guess I don't know where exactly you wanted me to go with that one, but I guess that would be my general thoughts. I think that it's an appropriate tool, and being able to spread that cost over a larger time horizon actually creates more equitable cost sharing in the end.
Yeah, and then Jan also had a question, and I apologize if I missed it up before, but I know that a question regarding the Orange Hub. I know you voted against it, but how can we best ensure that the city plan is followed?
Sure, that's a great question. Thanks, Jan, and hi, Jan. So as you pointed out, I did vote to not build the parking structure at Orange Hub. Through my speaking time, I shared some concerns about the cost. I shared some concerns around whether or not that's the highest and best use for a site that is directly adjacent to a transit stop or brand new soon to be LRT stop. And I think that for me, it was an opportunity to see yes, parking, but also maybe a mixed use style development where people are living, working, spending time there, and really facilitating that transit oriented development lifestyle that we're after. So to your question around, how do we make sure that we're following through on the city plan? I think that first of all, it's a big question, but there's a number of ways. So when I think about the city plan, I think of it as kind of this fairly high level visionary document. It talks about the direction we want to go. It's a very long range plan, and it talks about how, from a high level, how we're going to get there. Now, there's a bunch of plans that happen underneath the city plan. So things like district planning, things like the zoning bylaw renewal, those are the tools for implementation that will help us get there. So yes, there's these types of decisions where, we're kind of trying to reflect on whether or not it's in alignment with the city plan. Personally, I felt like this one wasn't, but when it comes to moving forward, those types of conversations around realizing the city plan through district planning, through zoning bylaw renewal, through things like the energy transition strategy, even through things like our community safety and well-being work, because the city plan is not just about built infrastructure. It's also about social infrastructure. It's about creating a community and a city that is welcoming and fosters a sense of belonging. So translating some of those high-level visionary documents into tangible, actionable work is really the space that we're in now. So that's one of the things, honestly, I'm most excited about. things like 15-minute communities where it sounds fantastic. People can get really excited about that. But even looping back to Miles' point about how do we get that missing middle development that'll facilitate 15-minute communities. That's the space we're in now. And that's the work that's ahead of us.
Perfect. And then there was a few folks here that were talking about the 50th Street grade separation.
Yes. Oh, I forgot to mention that one. Absolutely.
Budget and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so 50th Street grade separation was approved. I know that is quite a sore spot for a lot of folks. I think we all can recall a time where we've been stuck behind that train. So really happy to see that is moving forward, because not only is it's not just about sort of commuter traffic, but it's actually an industrial corridor as well. So there's some tie-ins to our economy as well. So yes, that happened. And I should also mention another one that I'm quite excited about that happened during budget was our support for BIAs, so business improvement areas. So BIAs, there's a number of them in Ward Métis, and they're kind of our main streets, if you will, and being able to support their recovery throughout COVID will really start to, kickstart our recovery as a city as a whole. So that was another big one during budget that I was pleased to throw my support behind. Yeah, any other ones for the last few minutes we have here, Mike?
Yeah, so we're going to do Kevin's, which was what is the plan, to deal with violent crime in Macaulay, Parkdale, and Cromdale area?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know that's a major concern, and it's a concern for me too. And, I think that when it comes to violent crime, it kind of ties into that larger conversation around community safety and well-being. That's the type of work that we need police to be able to respond to immediately and quickly. So being able to, again, thinking of that macro picture, divert some of the calls that may be used more, I'll say, better dealt with by maybe a mental health professional. If we're able to kind of offload some of those so that police can really deal with and focus on the work that they need to be doing in our communities, I think that's imperative. So that's a bit of a longer range outlook for it. But I share your concern. I really do. So being able to...
Oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry, Mike.
Oh, no. I have another one here from Harry, whenever you're ready.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
This is kind of in regards to both, I would say, like the Otwell redesign as well as a little bit of the snow clearing. But Harry asks, can the city incorporate boulevards in the sidewalk design so that the windrows have a place to go instead of into the parking lane?
Yeah, so I guess speaking to Otwell in particular, I do believe there is contemplation of adding in some boulevards. So it would essentially be, someone's private property. There would be I believe it's shared use path right now, and then boulevard landscaping with trees. So I do think that that's being considered when we're going through and doing neighborhood renewal. So hopefully that answers your question. Let me just read it again. Incorporate boulevards into sidewalk design. Yeah. So I do think we're definitely considering that, and that's a great suggestion. Awesome. Anything else? And absolutely, Miles, shout out to Greater Hardisty. Okay, so with the last few minutes here, I might just wrap up, unless there's anything else in the comments, Mike, before I'll do my closing here.
No, it's 7:55. I would say you're good to go.
Awesome. Well, I don't have much of a long closing or anything, but I did just again want to flag that the new website is up and running. Please feel free, check it out. Our blog posts are going to start rolling. We, like I mentioned, have one up about problem properties. We also have one up about snow and ice. So if you want to dig into either of those, go check it out. And there's also the opportunity to sign up for a newsletter if you want to stay engaged and updated. And I just want to thank you for joining us. I had a really good time tonight, and thank you so much for all of your engagement. Thank you for the fantastic comments and questions that we had coming in throughout this session. And yeah, if you want to have further conversations, reach out to our office. You'll either hear from Mike or Michael. And yeah, please send in suggestions for how we can improve. You know, this is our very first one. We want to make this as enjoyable and fun for everybody as possible. And I just hope you have a great evening, everybody. This has been fantastic.